Hey everyone, this is Theo from parkerblocks.com. In today's video, I'm going to show you some paper samples from Legion Paper. Legion Paper is a company started in New York in 1994, so they have been around for more than 20 years. When I went online to check out their website, I was surprised by their huge catalog of paper. And this box set that you are looking at right now, this is a limited edition box set that was created to raise funds for the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund so that the money can go towards helping those people affected by Hurricane Harvey. There were two box sets created. One is the small box set with pads that measure 2.5 by 3.5 inches, and that's the one that I have here. There is also another box set which is the larger one with 9 by 12 inches paper pad, but that was sold out very quickly, so I bought this instead. This is a good opportunity for me to test out the various papers made by Legion Paper. There are 11 types of paper in that box, so let me just lay them all out for you. We have Stonehenge aqua paper. Is to our watercolor paper. This is hot press and this is cold press. We have Stonehenge light, white, warm white. We have colors and we have craft. And we have this paper called Lenox with 100% cotton paper, and we have 3 Yupo paper. These are the various drawing media that I'm going to test with the papers. I have alcohol markers, crayons, watercolor, pigment liners. I have my Uniball Air with waterproof black ink inside. This is a Pentel color brush pen with water-soluble ink, color pencils, and some graphite pencils. Let's take a look at the Stonehenge paper first. This is the light. So I'm going to start by using dry media and then move on to using markers, crayons, and then the wet media. I'm going to do that for all the various papers so that you can see the differences between the marks that I make on the paper across all the different papers. So let's start with this first. This is very fine grain paper. It's quite smooth. So this is a 4B graphite pencil, and it seems like you can cover the white of the paper quite nicely, quite thoroughly. And let me switch over to a 9B pencil. It's able to take on the graphite quite nicely. Let's see if I can really fill up the paper. And now let's use color pencils. It seems like the paper can take on a few layers of color pencils quite nicely. And now let's test out alcohol markers. This is a Warm 3 from Copic. Let me try to blend the shades. Seems that I can blend the shades quite nicely. This paper is made with 100% cotton. It's only 135 GSM, so the paper is quite thin, and alcohol markers, they do bleed through to the opposite page and also onto the next page of paper. So this is not the best paper for alcohol-based markers. And now let's try some crayons. This is actually Caran d'Ache Neo Color Oil Pastel. And it works really nicely on the paper. And this is red. You can still see some white of the paper showing through. And this is a light blue. Let me try a darker blue to see if I can get some color blending. The paper definitely has no problem taking more than one layer of crayons or colored pencils. And now let's draw with ink. This is a rollerball pen. And this is a felt tip pen. This is a fountain pen. And lastly, we have a brush pen. Pen and ink works really well on the Stonehenge light. The lines are sharp, there is no feathering, and for this water-based ink, it doesn't bleed through to the other side. And now we are going to test this with watercolor. This paper is able to handle light washes. This paper is 135 GSM, so it's a bit thin and the paper does buckle slightly when you have water applied over it. But at least it doesn't bleed over to the other side, so that's good. This is what I have for you so far. So I'm going to apply the same marks and washes with all the other papers and compare them at the end of this video. I've just finished applying the crayon or the wax oil pastel on all the paper and also ink on the paper, and now I want to point out something first. This is ink on Yupo paper. I wrote these words quite a long time ago and they haven't dried yet. You can see this shiny finishing, and also the ink here, they are not dry yet, even after a long time. I've just completed painting watercolor on some of the paper, and now I'm going to see what will happen if I apply watercolor on Yupo paper. Now this paper, this is actually made with a synthetic polypropylene substrate. So this is a non-porous surface and it actually repels water. So Yupo paper is definitely not going to be suitable for watercolor paper, but I'm still going to see what's going to happen when I put some watercolor paint and water on this paper. This is the heavyweight Yupo paper, so let's try and put some watercolor on it and see what's going to happen. I can definitely see and feel that water is not being absorbed on the surface. There are also some particles on the paper. I'm not sure if they are from the French ultramarine paint or if it's because I did not wash my brush properly. But it's probably from French ultramarine because these particles, they are quite fine. You can see the paint moving along. And now I'm going to show you how alcohol marker behaves on the paper. The paper really doesn't want to absorb any of the ink. Let me use a darker color. So this is alcohol marker. They are supposed to dry very quickly, but even so on this paper it takes a while for it to dry. And this is warm gray W10. See how the ink can still move back. Alright, I have applied all the media on all the paper, so let's go through them one by one. I'm going to start with the Yupo paper because it's very interesting. All the three Yupo paper, they perform quite similarly. It's just that the weight of the paper is different. So let's take a look at this. This is translucent, this is medium, and this is heavy. And this is how graphite looks like on this paper. So this paper is made of synthetic polypropylene substrate, so it's not made from any tree or cellulose, and it's very smooth. When I first touched the surface of the paper, it felt so smooth that I really wonder if graphite is going to work on the paper, but it actually handles graphite quite well. So this is how it looks like. And you can see the graphite sheen. This is color pencil. Color pencil works a bit, I would say, strangely. So I first applied yellow and then I applied red. I applied red over the yellow, but because yellow has already been applied, the red wasn't able to go on top of the yellow. So what this means is you cannot layer color pencils onto this paper. Anyway, this is probably not the best paper for colored pencil, but the effect with color pencil, it does look quite nice. And this was created with alcohol markers. It takes a while to dry, but it dries faster compared to watercolor or pen and ink. At the bottom here, I tried to blend these 4 shades together, and because the markers, the ink, they do not dry that quickly, when I move the marker to the second shade, it actually sort of blends everything together, and here as well, it just blends everything together. So it's very difficult or impossible to blend markers on Yupo paper. So all the 3 Yupo paper, they perform very similarly. And this is the oil wax pastel. You can layer with oil wax pastel. So for this, I applied yellow again as the layer that is beneath everything, and then I applied red over the yellow, and this time I was able to get red on top of the yellow. And lastly, I applied blue on top of yellow and red, so I have a green and I have this very dark color. But the thing is, you can apply layers if you are using pastel or oil pastels or crayons. As for ink, the lines are very sharp, there's no feathering at all, but it will take a long time for ink to dry. And in fact here, because some of the ink, they did not dry, I closed the pad and some of the ink got onto this page here and it smeared this side. If you want to protect your artwork, you should spray fixative over them to really make those drawings permanent. But before you use fixative, I do recommend that you test out the fixative and the media that you're using on some scrap piece of paper so that you do not have unwanted results. Because some inks, they are not pigment based, they may actually break apart when you spray fixative over the lines. And this is how watercolor looks like when it's dry on Yupo paper. I used a lot of paint here, so this part here, even though it's dry, it's still a bit sticky. I read that you can still reactivate the watercolor, so if you want to do some correction or if you want to clean up some part of the paper, you can just have some wet towel and sort of clean this off, and it does clean off quite well. This is almost like new. Let me try it with the alcohol marker. So this is run with alcohol markers. The surface, oh, this is quite permanent. This is definitely not going to come off. So for water-based media like watercolor, you can remove them, but not for alcohol-based markers. Let's move on to the Stonehenge paper. So there are quite a lot. I am not able to remember each and every one of their characteristics, so I'm just going to write a blog post about them. So you can check out the blog post if you want to find out about their characteristics, like the paper weight, the cotton content, and some other extra information. So now I'm going to compare dry media, pencil, color pencil, and also alcohol markers to let you see how they look like. It seems like all the different types of Stonehenge paper and the Lenox paper, they are able to handle graphite color pencils quite well. Some paper are a bit rougher. For example, this paper, this is cold press paper, so it's a bit rougher. It's a bit more difficult to cover the white of the paper. Here's a closer look at the Stonehenge watercolor paper. So this is quite rough, and this one looks a bit rough as well. This is Stonehenge white, also a bit rough. Let me show you the light, Stonehenge light. and Stonehenge medium. So this is a bit finer, the paper is a bit smoother. This is Stonehenge craft paper. This paper is quite thick, 250 GSM, and the color is brown. It's inspired by paper grocery bags. You can use pencils on it. Some people like to use white and also graphite to create the light and shadow with the mid-tone of the paper. And here we have the oil wax pastel and pen and ink. So for, again, this paper, this is the cold press paper, it's very rough. So it's very difficult to cover the white of the paper, even if you press down really hard. For pen and ink, it's fine. The lines are very sharp, there's no feathering. For brush pens, you can see the edges, they are quite rough. I drew this rather slowly, and even so the edges, they are still quite rough because of the rough paper texture. I'm going to take pictures of all this and put them on my blog so that you can see the texture a bit clearer. Anyway, if I'm going to go through them one by one, it will be very difficult to remember the characteristics of each paper. One thing I wanted to talk about is this bleeding through of the alcohol marker. So even though some of the paper, they are a bit thick, like this watercolor paper, which is 300 GSM, even so the alcohol marker is still bled through. And this is how watercolor looks like on the various paper. Obviously this is not suitable for watercolor. This is the Stonehenge craft. These two are watercolor paper. This is hot press, this is cold press. These are various Stonehenge paper, and this is the Lenox cotton paper. I am not sure if you can see the difference between the watercolor swatches just by looking at them like this. It's actually quite difficult to see any difference, and any difference is quite subtle. It's just the main difference will be how the water reacts when you are actually painting on the paper. For actual watercolor paper, I can see that the colors, they blend quite nicely, quite gradually, so we can get nice gradations like this. For Stonehenge paper, the medium, the light, and the others, the blending can be quite abrupt like this. This is watercolor paper, and these three are Stonehenge paper. So the colors here, they seem to be able to spread out more gradually and more easily compared to this three paper. This is hot press paper, and this is cold press paper. It's actually a bit difficult to see the difference, but this has more texture. You can see the edges here, they are a bit rougher. Even though I use French ultramarine, I wasn't able to see much granulation on both. Perhaps there is just a bit more texture on the cold press paper. Lenox cotton paper is quite interesting. This is 100% cotton paper, and so are the other Stonehenge paper that I have showed you earlier. But this paper is a bit different because this paper, it seems that it's a bit drier. This is Lenox paper, and this is the hot press watercolor paper. Can you see the white of the paper showing through? This happens with some of the drier watercolor papers, and it's here as well on this Lenox paper. I must say that it's quite confusing to feature so many paper. So to sort of conclude, Yupo paper is quite interesting because this is not like normal paper, and when used with traditional media, many of my usual experiences with cartridge paper or watercolor paper, it does not apply with Yupo paper. So this is quite fun to use, but it's also very I'm not sure what this paper is best used for, let me just put it that way. As for the cartridge paper or the fine grain drawing paper, we have Stonehenge warm white, white colors, light. I think there are other variations on their website, but these are the ones that I have. Warm white would be paper that is a bit warmer, has a cream sort of look to it. These colors, they are actually other colored papers in this pad. The Stonehenge drawing paper, they are good for dry media and occasional wet wash with watercolor. This is Stonehenge craft paper, thick brown paper. We have hot press and cold press watercolor paper. I've only painted one swatch on the page, so I cannot really say how good the watercolor paper is or is not. I'm probably going to buy the paper to try them out in the future to give you a more informed review. And lastly, we have the Lenox cotton. This is very thick paper, 250 GSM. It's not as good compared to the watercolor paper because it's a bit dry, but I think it's good for mixed media or any sort of thick application. I know that is a lot to take in, so be sure to check out my text review as well. The link will be in the video description below. And before I end this video, if you are also using Legion paper, let me know about your experience. Let me know which paper is your favorite paper. I would love to hear from you. So thanks for watching today's video. See you in the next one. Bye.